Good evening, and welcome to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam. So, we're going to talk about Creed and Creed 2. We're also going to talk about the Pokemon Presents. I think we're going to stick with Creed and Creed 2. I think we're going to drop the Pokemon Presents because I want to take the time to address a news story that's been unfolding that we really haven't talked about too much. But not to sound alarmist or like I'm making a mountain out of a molehill on any of this. But I think we're looking at something that could be potentially very dangerous in the reasonably near future. That's about Disney, and I've gone both ways on Disney. I try to be kind of even keel when it comes to covering corporations because, as I've said multiple times before, corporations are not your friend. Corporations are there to make as much money as possible, largely at the detriment of the people who are impacted by them. So like they exist to screw workers as much as possible without getting caught, screw other people whenever they can, and keep as much money as they possibly can for themselves. I'm not saying that Disney specifically is doing that in any specific case. And Disney has had its fair share of things that are not exactly the most consumer friendly or worker friendly or any number of other friendly things. They basically control the government of the city of Anaheim at this point. They basically control, they controlled Reedy Creek up until recently. They have done, you know, so much not great stuff, and they try to make up for it. And they're trying to do better in the most minuscule and inconsequential ways possible. But I digress. That's not what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about Disney in that way. We're here to talk about the broader implications about what's going on with the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And regardless, and the thing is too, it's like it's kind of an uncomfortable position to be put in because it's like Florida has kind of played this very well, and by Florida I mean Governor DeSantis, because in the event that it's kind of a hard position to get into defend Disney in this case, but this is less about defending Disney and more about defending the individual, you know, freedoms of people. Because here's the thing about the situation. For those of you who don't know and haven't been following, because it's not a big glamorous story, it's kind of a behind the scenes thing that's kind of been slowly trickling through. Um, Bob Chapek, the previous CEO of Disney, after Bob Iger retired or left, and then Chapek took over, um, was pressured about taking a stance on the "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida. Iger was very much about, I'm going to wear my political affiliations on my sleeve. I'm going to, everyone's going to know exactly where I stand on all of this. Chapek was less so. Chapek was very much, I'm going to keep that close to the vest because it's not as important for how the company gets run, how I feel. That said, Florida is still the home of Walt Disney World. So as he started to get leaned on by members of the press and members of the corporation, he eventually took the stance after badgering, like, well, no, we're not for you know the Don't Say Gay bill, which is the Parental Rights and Education Act. I think is the formal name for it, where it's this really dumb kind of law where it's like it's designed to suppress people from expressing themselves as LGBT and designed to try and scare younger LGBT people into the closet. It's an entire situation where it's like they say, oh, we're trying to keep it from little kids from getting groomed. And it's like, well, then why are all the provisions about high school in there? But anyway, that all notwithstanding, um, they come out to say that. Now, Disney World operates differently from other theme parks. Disney World operates in what's called the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which is this special district that was founded by a law in Florida that gives it kind of self-governing status, meaning that it can levy its own taxes and it can be responsible for all of its own things that it needs to have: fire department, police department, um, sewage treatment, and all these other things. Like there are also provisions in there, like if it wants to build an airport, it can build an airport. If it wants to build um, what's it called? If it wants to build a nuclear power plant, it could do that. Now those are now out with this new law, but whatever. So all of these things are kind of pointed are there. So DeSantis floats after this happens, DeSantis floats like, oh, well, maybe we should look at the self-governing status. And immediately a law is drawn up that takes away the self-governing status of Reedy Creek. And because Florida Republicans have a supermajority in both houses, it went away. Because it's like, now Disney's defying us, we're going to take away their special, their special status. And it's like, okay. So all of that happens very quickly. Then it starts to come out what's going to happen now as a result of Reedy Creek being dissolved. It's like, well, the land kind of sits on this thing where it borders a few counties, and what's going to end up happening is if the counties, um, if they do this, the county's going to have to absorb the tax and the debt from the bonds and all of that kind of bullshit, all the financials, which is going to drive up property taxes and stuff like that in all these surrounding counties. Um, because Disney was, like, Reedy Creek was taxing Disney at, like, double the rate that everyone else was, which is why if you ever went to Disney World, it's like, it's so clean. Like, there are no potholes anywhere there. All of those things are handled by them because they're being taxed at such a higher rate for the land. It's also why Disney's able to build stuff so quickly, because they don't have to sit there and go through red tape to get approval for things. Um, so all of this is kind of happening, and we have all these problems kind of arising out of this, and then they have to do a new law, and the new law would give control over to a new board that would oversee the land and would control taxation and all of that. Would rewrite what the district can and can't do, and all of that. So the situation we have now is a corporation decided to speak out against a political party, and that political party has now taken away some rights that it was given by law and taken them and put the state in charge of what those people can do, what that corporation can do on that land. Which again, I'm not thrilled that the example in the situation is a giant corporation, because it's like, well, I'm not even of the belief that corporations should be allowed to make donations to political campaigns to begin with. But be that as it may, that's what it is. But the problem is, you agreed to give these rights to them, and then what happened was you took them away because they changed their political affiliation. And this would not, like, as I don't think Universal exists on one of these, but it's a weird situation all around. So this new committee that's been established under this law, this new agency, or this new thing that's running Reedy Creek, or whatever it's going to be called now, this special district, is this thing is now organizing. It's 5 state appointees, if I remember correctly, and the 5 state appointees all come from the governor's office, which is a Republican. So the issue now becomes that we have, again, land that is owned by a corporation that is expressed a opinion that is not of the belief of the party in power in that state. So the state has now taken control of the land and is now micromanaging what can and can't be done on it to a degree that it wasn't able to before. And then we get to today, now that the bill has been signed into law, where now we have DeSantis going out there and saying, I'm hoping that they'll use this to try and control content. So now we're at a point where they're trying to control what a media company does by holding their land hostage. Like, it's such a weird situation to be in. And, like, here's the thing, I understand. I understand that, like, I saw a comic recently, it was like, like, people talking about wokeism, and it's like, oh, like, they did a side-by-side where it's like, oh, they put women in this, why are they forcing feminism on us? And it's like, people give them a weird look, and it's like, oh, why are they forcing all this wokeness on us? And like saying, oh, there are too many black people in this movie. Why is that? It's like, oh, why is this movie so woke? It's just become a code word for, we want to, keep the systems in place that we have now without acknowledging them anywhere. And whatever you want to say about that, wherever you fall on that political spectrum, the idea, if you're an American, that you have a freedom of speech is paramount, and not just on Twitter. Not just, we're going to have Elon Musk liberate Twitter so that way we can go on there and say whatever we want without fear of, being banned or whatever. That's not freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is if you have decided, as a society, which apparently Americans have via the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United, that, you know, corporations have the same freedom of speech that everyone else does. If you're going to say that that's the case, this is the government saying you do not have that freedom of speech if you do not agree with us. And the idea that the government can do that and then control the land on which you operate to try and force you into compliance is a horrifying situation to be in. And the fact that Republicans are kind of cheering this along and treating this like a victory is a very scary place to be. Because here's the thing. If you agree with this and you're looking at this where it's like, oh, well, and think of it like this. Republicans who are listening to this, if they haven't turned it off yet, because I don't tend to get political too much, but, it is what it is. If you're listening to this and you're a Republican, think about this for a second. If you're afraid about the woke agenda or the agenda of the left coming out here and being like, I mean, there are true Republicans, I feel like, somewhere out there, people who believe in limited government. If you want to say that, then by all means, all that. But if that's the case, you're not going to agree with this. But if you're someone who is agreeing with this decision, think of it like this. Let's put the shoe on the other foot. If you really think that there is a vast conspiracy to push this on people, push what Disney is pushing, wokeism, which is just we're going to let more minorities have leading roles and let more, LGBT people have leading roles. If you think that's a legitimate thing that is happening, setting the precedent that giving the government the ability to control content and control the media and control what people can do with their land if they believe or do not believe in the doctrine that they are subscribed to is a scary precedent to set for yourself if that's what you truly believe. If you truly believe that that's what Disney is doing and they're trying to indoctrinate kids, imagine the power that would happen if the federal government looked at this thing that DeSantis is doing in Florida and you had a far left person in power in the federal government and they saw that and they're like, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that. How does that work out? And the problem is you've set this precedent for yourself now. So maybe this wasn't such a great idea if that's truly your concern. But that's all we'll talk about with this. And I feel like putting something else after this is kind of a weird thing, because to go from that, which is a pretty serious topic, to and now here's Creed, or here's Creed 2, or here's the Pokemon Presents, where there's new DLC coming for Pokemon, Scarlet and Violet coming late this year. It's like, this whole situation is something that should scare people. And it's like, on either side of the spectrum, you should look at the situation, and if you are a conservative, you should look at it and be like, oh, we're giving the government way too much power. We are giving the government a ton of power here that it really shouldn't have to control everything about what we do. Should we do that? Because, the government has the power of taxation. I don't know, I'm not going to get back on this, but it's you understand. It's they could raise the taxes on you specifically based on your political views, or your posting on social media, or whatever it is you do. If you don't fall in line with what they want, whoever's in charge, it could be bad for you with this precedent they're setting. And I know I sound like a lunatic, but I feel like that is a far less, further down the line thing than we're thinking it is, based on everything going on right now. It's a scary prospect to think about. It's think about all the things that could potentially fall into place with this, with this situation, and how that could, irreparably harm society. So we'll wrap up there for today. Our next episode will be next week. We'll be doing, let me look at my calendar real quick. The next episode will be Scream, the original Scream from 1996. We will also be ranking the DCEU on the 14th. The 15th, we'll be doing our Oscar wrap-up. The 21st, we'll be doing all the John Wick movies. And the 28th, we'll be doing Garden State. Go to multipleworldproductions.com for the full calendar of events up on. If you go on the top bar or a little drop down menu, it's going to be under upcoming events. There's the calendar for the next month. So until then, have a great rest of your week.